5:30 in the morning, and I am headed to Galveston, Texas, where I'm going to catch a launch boat, and then I'll be going 10 miles offshore to board a tanker ship, on which I will be attempting and hopefully repairing the radar. The vessel is not able to come in at the moment because they are on Coast Guard hold until I repair the radar. So this should be an interesting day and an interesting video. The video also includes footage when another offloading technician was almost crushed between the crew boat and the ship. I arrived at the port of Galveston at approximately 6 a.m. and located my offshore supply vessel that would be my ride out to the ship, the Green Knight. The motor vessel Green Knight is a 110 feet long utility boat, and it is operated by Harbor Offshore out of Galveston, Texas. Upon boarding the vessel, it was quickly realized this is a much older boat than I normally ride out on. It was built in 1973 and is powered by 2 Detroit diesel engines producing 1,200 horsepower. It is able to carry up to 19,000 gallons of diesel on board and has a max speed of 12 knots, and is also capable of carrying up to 46 tons of cargo on the stern deck. And, unfortunately for me, even though I was instructed to arrive at 6 a.m., due to a short notice change of scheduling due to the bad weather, 2 more trucks of additional cargo arrived that were also destined for the vessel. Therefore, I had to wait 4 hours on board before we finally departed the dock. An outbound container ship passed us on our port side just as we were exiting the Galveston jetties and entering the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Downtown Galveston can be seen on the top left portion of the screen, and the seas definitely picked up as we exited the jetties. And because of the rough seas, it would take us over an hour to reach the vessel 10 miles offshore. On an extremely smooth day, the gangway seen here would be lowered all the way down to the waterline, and we would use that to exit the offshore supply vessel. However, today, the seas were not smooth enough to do that. Therefore, a combination of gangway and pilot ladder were used to depart. On days when the seas are really rough, a basket will be lowered down by crane that we will step into, and then will be lifted off the deck onto the ship. But fortunately today, that was not necessary. I was the first one up the ladder. Therefore, I was able to capture this footage of the life raft technician climbing up the ladder and boarding the vessel. Also, once I was on deck, I had to wait approximately 10 minutes for my tools and radar parts to be lifted up off the offshore supply vessel to the upper deck. And then it was off to the bridge to try to repair this radar. The one that's not turning, that is the radar antenna that is broken. On the screen now is the display of the X-band radar. That is the smaller antenna that was rotating. As you can see, the blobs on the screen are other vessels anchored around our vessel. This is what a fully functional radar screen should appear like. Now when we move over to the non-functional S-band radar, it is receiving a processor azimuth error, and also it alternates in between identifying as an X-band radar when it is in fact an S-band radar. So I need to go up to the antenna, take a look inside, and see if I can figure out what is going on. Once the cover was pulled off the radar, I immediately identified one problem. Absolutely every electronic component inside of the radar was covered in oil. Apparently the DC motor that turns the antenna array was spraying its internal lubricant all inside of the radar, thus shorting out many components. I replaced the obviously shorted out power supply, and also this TR control board, which is the brains of the radar, which tells the below deck unit that it is an S-band, so I knew that was faulty as well. After putting everything back together and going back down to the bridge, it was time to test the radar. And even though I solved some of the problems, the radar antenna would not rotate. It was therefore determined that a new motor would also be needed, as I guess the motor shorted out after all the lubricant leaked outside of the gearbox. Unfortunately, that is one part I did not bring with me. Therefore, this repair was not successful. The offshore supply boat that I rode out on was not completely finished unloading its deliveries. Therefore, I now headed down to the mess room to have me some cold Indian food. I put a few dabs of this liquid fire on my food, and after thoroughly clearing my sinuses, I completed my dinner, and it was time to go home. And once again, I was the first one down the ladder, and little did I know I would almost capture the death of the technician following behind me coming down the ladder. It was a very near miss, as he was almost crushed between the crew boat and the vessel.